We have disturbing parallels between what happened in 1940 and 2020. So, the disturbing parallels between that is that we could have turned fully fascist back then, but let's hope that we don't go through this now. Um, the editorial board readers are familiar with the exception with political time, or how one party and ideals prevail with the majority of Americans for 4 or 5 decades before falling into a period of transition, after which the other party and its ideals prevail. Um, but most don't know why we're obsessed with it. And let me tell you this: it's because we've been feeling hopeless, and I hate feeling me. And for me, I hate feeling hopeless, knowing that history isn't static, knowing that it moves in recurring circles rather than in a straight line with a beginning and an end, and that gives me hope. It gives me hope to know, good or bad, nothing ever stays the same. These paradigms have been for more than a year a regular subject of discussions between Jay Weixelbaum and John Stower. Um, he's a writer and business historian who's producing a streaming miniseries about the time a Nazi spy joined U.S. businessmen to toast the fall of France in a Manhattan hotel, while a Jewish FBI agent investigated the whole situation. Jay's project is called A Nazi on Wall Street, and you could donate to the cause here. And during our conversation, he explained why he believes that we are moving into a new paradigm and how the choices made in the 1940s seem to mirror choices being made in the 2020s. And we could have turned fully fascist back then, but we didn't. Um, Basically, there's questions back and forth. In a recent thread, you said the January 6th insurrection was a watershed moment between paradigms. Can you explain what you mean by that? And what does J6, also known as January 6th, have to do with it? Um, a paradigm shift describes a major change in our lives. The term status quo describes a time when we have a shared understanding about how politics work, how economics work, and how culture works. And when a paradigm shift happens, the status quo changes. The paradigm shifts can take many years, and my belief is that we know that we're in one when it's not just scholars pointing this out, but when everyone sees it and feels that January 6th is a moment like that. Many historians have observed that the Republican Party had been in the business of rejecting democratic ideals since the passage of the Civil Rights Act in the 1960s. They were unwilling to share a democracy with people that they deemed were less than them, and Watergate was part of this. The 2000 election and the 2016 election were other watershed moments of the GOP's slide toward a full rejection of American democracy, and I see January 6th as a culmination. Can you characterize the paradigm that we were leaving and perhaps the one we are entering now? And paradigms are a buildup of chaos in our political, economic, and social system. As unresolved problems feed off each other, in the chaotic periods, even small events can have enormous impact. But we're but we're right in the middle of the ship, so it's hard to see where we're going with this. The reason I'm adapting my research on American businessmen working with Nazis in 1940 into a streaming miniseries is because in 1940 it really wasn't fucking clear which way things were going, and that was a paradigm shift too. We grew up with stories about a triumphant America that won World War II, but in 1940 it wasn't at all clear how history was going to play out, and we want American audiences to understand that, especially as we inevitably look back and reflect on our current moment now. Just as 2020 was a crucial year, I believe 2022 will also decide our fates for the next era. However long it will be, Democrats in Congress are beginning the process of altering the filibuster to pass voting rights legislation this week, which is a direct response to GOP legislators passing laws to throw out millions of votes that they may happen to not like. Democratic leaders call this a continuation of January 6th and what happened. And that's crucial, and we don't know how this is going to play out. Another big unpredictable factor is the pandemic. I think future historians provided humanity services will debate how COVID helped push the previous president out of power, or basically previous squatter out of power, particularly his lack of ability to address it effectively. A third major factor is the midterms. And yes, the previous status quo predicts the party holding the White House to take losses, but we are heading towards a new status quo that rules may no longer apply to us. Um, corporate donations to the GOP House candidates is about half of what it was, and gerrymandering, while still a major threat to democracy, hasn't played out as badly as it could have after the 2020 consensus, or census basically. Also, depending on how the Supreme Court rules on the reproductive choice, this may dramatically affect turnout. So there's still a bunch of unknowns that could have a major impact on this critical turning point. And when did this all start? And with the white backlash against civil rights, the civil rights era and feminism in particular, as well as hostility to the new, as a as a hostility to the New Deal, animated the right. They built up religious and allegedly democratic factions in the 1970s that coalesced in the Reagan Revolution, which could then be escalated for over 4 decades. History is always events leading to and from each other, and there are certainly anecdotes um, in the 1920s and 30s of the GOP. It was taking money from literal Nazi spies in order to try to sweep Franklin Roosevelt out of power. Our government knew this was happening. There was an intense and an often unseen struggle to fight back against this Nazi American right wing coalition. Is this the 1940s work in the road you were talking about? Yes, precisely. Like with other paradigm shifts, there were years of building to this point and years of aftermath. Nazi spies were operating in the U.S. in the 1930s. The FBI was tasked with tracking them down, and meanwhile, U.S. companies had businesses operating within the Nazi Germany. Beyond the lesser-known activities, the right-wing groups and personalities espoused to the Nazi cause, espoused the Nazi cause to millions of Americans. Many Americans found this ideology enticing. It's easy to blame immigrants for many problems. Many Americans believed that the U.S. should stay out of European affairs, and some Americans were sympathetic to the Germany post-World War One. The radio priest Charles Coughlin had broadcasted these views to millions of Americans. He was basically known as the Rush Limp Dick of his day. Nazi influence in the U.S. culminated with a huge march and rally in New York City in 1939. Thousands gathered at Madison Square Garden to listen to blatantly fascist speeches under the banner of George Washington adorned with swastikas. In 1940, FDR gave a fresh directive to hunt down any Nazis that might be hiding in the U.S. The FBI built a secret spy headquarters inside the 30 Rock building to spy on Nazi activities worldwide, but especially in South America where they could get raw materials, a war machine that needs to be effective. Without recapping the story of World War II, Franklin Roosevelt was reelected despite Nazi groups funneling money into Charles Lindbergh's campaign, and Franklin Roosevelt started providing aid to Britain and preparing for war against fascism, and thus the paradigm shift started to turn on the events of 1940. Um, the current President Biden pinned blame for January 6th on Trump, and no sitting president or squatter in my lifetime came within an inch of calling his predecessor a traitor, and that seems like an indicator of paradigm shifting. No, absolutely, I don't think we've seen anything like this since at least the Civil War. The evidence is so overwhelming. I think Biden was on safe political grounds to take off that glove. It's also important to point out that fascist violence often starts with the war on truth, and Biden was making a clearer point to push back on fascist lies that Trump was promoting. I'd call the Republicans' sabotage of the pandemic recovery a form of fascist violence, but that's just me. I think that's also a fair observation, too. Fascism is unsustainable as a form of government. It's inherently irrational and destructive. It's an extreme form of populism based on emotions, feelings of grievance, more specifically. It's inherently unstable foundation to attempt to run on a society. The economies need stability. Political regimes need economic stability to stay viable long term. Fascists don't care about the long term. They care about feeding grievance addictions. They build their policy around that. Basically, perhaps this ties into our observation about civil war. It would take sacrifice of an order that most people would reject. Exactly, I think the potential for violence and destruction is great, but I don't see that as a long-term solution because people won't tolerate a consumer economy being interrupted so drastically by violence and disruption. Scholars of Nazi Germany saw this just below their fake bravado. The Nazis were terrified about economic problems and will never know how the Nazi regime might have worked if it hadn't been made foolish. If it hadn't made foolish military choices, but it's pretty clear that things are quite unsustainable. Um, I think the Republican Party has been able to lean toward anti-democracy and fascism precisely because it's still rested on the democratic order. Take that away, and it's a new status quo. I agree. It's a parasitic, and yes, fascism is a parasite on the democratic democracy, but it can kill its host. then all bets are off on how long it will survive for. And what would you tell? What would you tell the coming midterms? And what would you tell? And what would tell you the coming midterms are different from the previous ones that we've witnessed? Preserving democracy is a key policy issue. It will be a particular policy point discussed in numerous midterm campaigns. Typically, it's healthcare, guns, climate, etc. Democracy as policy is a new norm. Telling people that they need to vote now, or that they won't be able to depend on the votes in the future, is pretty drastic, and I'd argue a new development. We saw it in 2020, but this is now 2022. So if you like the video, give the video a like and subscribe to my channel RBW King, and also hit the notification bell so that you'll be notified when a new video comes out. And thanks for listening.